From the dung heap, everybody. These are my friends. A lot of them.
Friends.
There he is. Hi, sweetie.
Hello. Good morning, everybody.
And we're live. Hello. SPTV. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Fundy Sunday, as I like to say around here. So we're going to take a little break today. We're going to talk about some other religions besides Scientology and besides my own cult. So yeah, hi. I got a different view today. I thought I would switch things around and turn the tables and see how you like this. Here we are. And I'm excited because I have a very special guest today. I've streamed with him many times, with panels and just the two of us. It's been great. I always learned so much. One of the smartest guys I know. And here he is, Mark Turi.
Hello.
Hey there,
Thanks for the comments. I had a lot of haters out there, actually, by the way, so it's always nice.
Who has a lot of haters? Me?
Good things from, yeah, we all do, right? It's inevitable.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, hey everybody. Glad to see you coming in. We got quite a few people already. So before we get into this, I want to share your new-ish channel, right? This is at Mark Turi 123, and there's his channel. And you go live at least, did you say twice a week?
Twice a week. Yeah, I do it live 3 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So usually on Wednesdays, although the last week and now the week coming up will be a different schedule, but normally we do on Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. And I just talk about random things that are usually actually voted on by on my community tab on my channel by people who who go over there and who like what I say. So I give two options, and we do a lot of different things, mostly to do with history and philosophy. We've done things like when we've discussed biological versus social determinism. So like the whole nature versus nurture debate, which is one thing. Mm. We talked about differences on what is science versus what is scientism and all this kind of thing. So a lot of that. And then on Saturdays, I do PowerPoints, and I do a lot of history PowerPoints. And yesterday I did one on the history of Yugoslavia, and I showed a picture of myself when I was 6, when my family were in Yugoslavia.
Really, I'll have to check that out. Awesome.
So, exactly, yeah. But it's been good. I've been very happy.
Great. Well, I did put the link. I'll do it again to your channel. Paste in the chat there, and everyone, just hop over and subscribe. You won't regret it. And there's your new channel. So wow. I was really fascinated. You had said, I think it was in the chat, and we were just referring very briefly in one of my streams about other religions, how there's overlap and how there's stories that were passed down even before, the whole concept of Christianity was even, real, a thing, right? And I'm really fascinated because to me, this is, I guess it's kind of like an equivalent, like sort of an equivalent to like being an SP. It's like, I'm asking you questions that might offend, some people that believe every last thing written in the Bible as God's word, as just that's the truth. So when you start to unravel some of the history and look at some things that happened before that, and stories that are very, very similar. I To me, this is actually new knowledge for me, because I didn't really know that. So I'm
Mhm.
all ears. I want to learn and to see where it goes. I like to do comparisons of religions and things
Yeah.
as well. So where are
I
we going
guess
to
the first
start?
well, the first thing to start with is like right at the beginning, um, long, long, long time ago, which is we have to sort of start off with the origins of our own species itself, which is the rough estimate is that Homo sapiens have been on Earth for roughly 200,000 years. And what's really interesting about that is language, constructed language, like linguistics of making sounds and stuff that then eventually becomes all the language we speak on Earth,
Mhm.
around 12,000 years ago. So there was a big gap of around 180,000 years, more or less, where there wasn't any actual verbal language. But as most people know, how did people communicate, especially with their origin stories, was in the hunter-gathering society and the caveman society and so forth. They would, of course, write on caves. There were cave drawings, which go back hundreds of thousands of years. And actually, that's pretty much where a lot of um, storytelling in and of itself begins. And I think that unfortunately, there's a lot of like misinformation on the fact that if it's old, it either means that it's more true, or if it's old, it means it's more false. But that's not the point. Or the point is just that nobody really knows exactly how we got here,
Right.
exactly why. And so, since the beginning, since consciousness, right? Since Homo sapiens evolved the consciousness, they've been up looking at the stars and trying to figure out why. And
Yeah.
so many of those stories, because we didn't have verbal language, were written. And then once we started to have verbal language, we got oral traditions. And so everything that you think of, even from the Torah, which is the first 5 books of Moses, began as an oral tradition. It was not really written down until afterwards, right? And when they
Right.
had scribes, and I also did a couple of weeks ago a PowerPoint on all of the Jewish denominations, and all the Jewish ethnic divisions on my channel. So if you want to, hey Chad, if you want to review that, that's something where I go back to the first and second temple era. But that's really when the Torah itself was written down, and that, of course, will influence not only Judaism but Christianity and Islam,
And
which is
about how many years? How many
basis.
years ago? How many years ago was it written down?
So the second temple era begins in 515 before Common Era, and it ended in 70 Common Era when the Romans destroyed the second temple. The Babylonians destroyed, of course, the first temple, and that was 1,200 before Common Era to 585 before Common Era. And so there were these scribes, and they were part of a group called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees group was one of the 4 or 5 groups of the sects within the Second Temple era. Again, because I actually don't know much about the New Testament / Christian Bible. There
I
might be references to these
I
people in
can
there.
even
I have
sing a
no
little
clue.
song about the
But for
Pharisees,
us,
because they're
yeah.
not
Okay,
fair, you
so there you
see.
go. That's right. Yeah.
And the
But they were the
Sadducees,
scribes.
the Pharisees and the
Yeah.
Sadducees are
Sadducees.
not fair.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I go through them. I go through the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots. And then I
Mhm.
make note of the fact that there were the Nazarenes, who were, of course, the early Christians that then
Yep.
morphed into Christianity. And that's kind of like the fifth, sect. But basically, the Pharisees wrote it down because after the temple was destroyed, there was some imperativeness to write down the traditions to then be carried on out of Jerusalem because there was no temple. And then we get into what was called the rabbinical Judaism phase, which is like in the 6th century, the Talmud. Anyway, the whole thing is that most societies, if we look at indigenous cultures, if we look at the cultures of the Middle East, Africa,
Mhm.
etc., the Australian continent, whomever the indigenous peoples are, they always almost have oral traditions. And in some cases, in the indigenous cultures of North America and South America and Oceania, and even among African indigenous peoples, they don't have it even written down yet. So there's a lot of traditions that are just passed on, oral traditions. They usually select someone from their community who would be what they call an oral scribe or have some kind of translation. They
Scribe,
listen
right,
to
yeah.
all the stories that everyone has received and then they transmit them and so forth. But there are cultures that haven't written it down. And so that's really where all these sacred texts come from. I mean, it's the same in the Vedas, it's the same with the Quran, it's the same with all religious scripture, starts at the basis of human storytelling. And the main point about human storytelling is that it's not exactly known if it was all supposed to be literal or all allegorical or all metaphorical or whatever. It depends on the culture, but in many cases, it is possible that the stories were not supposed to be taken literally. And so I remember, Marilyn, I guess it was maybe a year and a half ago. I think it was one of the early Nerdy Bunch episodes we did when we talked about the difference between fundamentalism and
Yes.
biblical criticism. So,
Yep.
in the Christian world specifically, in the Protestant Christian world specifically, the idea that the Bible is the literal word of God, that it cannot be changed, that creationism, 6,000 years old, and all that is
Yep.
maybe like 300 years old. It's a new modern movement and a fundamentalist Christianity which affects the Baptists and Pentecostals and other Protestant churches because it's a
Mhm.
form of theology, but it's not something shared through necessarily throughout all religions everywhere because there's a lot of people who don't take these stories too literally. So that's kind of where we can kind of start. It's like there's this big movement of people gathering over fire, getting their stories. Maybe some people thought it was literal, but probably the most literal interpretations that we hold today are modern. They're only within 300 years. So again, even young
Mhm.
earth creationism, there's no evidence really that people really necessarily believe the earth was 6,000 years old. They had their own views on things like this. But that codification of 6,000 years old within young earth creationism, again, roughly goes to a reaction of the scientific revolution. And that's only
Right,
around like 300 years old.
right. Yeah, that was a first, I guess, chink in the armor
Yeah,
of my beliefs was learning in school about evolution, about the how old the Earth is, and it was it set up definitely a cognitive dissonance in my mind because even all the cute little stories that that we were told about like Noah, it's just when you know science, it's like, wait a minute, this does not seem feasible whatsoever, you know.
right.
But we were taught that it was 100% true. And if God says it, I believe it, and that's it, you know? So,
Yeah,
can
I
you give
mean,
me an example, just, kind of, boiling it down to some examples of something that was told, ancient times that evolved into, say, Christianity, something that was, put as part of one of the origin stories in Christianity, because I'm really fascinated with that.
so one particular thing I don't that's part of we would call mythos, and I know a lot of people will say, well, myth means it's not true, it means it's fiction. It doesn't.
Right.
Myth comes from mythos, and a mythos is an epic that is actually supposed to not be literal and so forth. So there's a lot more going on. But one of the biggest things that I learned just relatively recently, because I did most of my religious education as an adult, not as a child, and the concept of resurrection of the dead, which is something that is taught in Judaism because it does come from the Old Testament slash Hebrew Bible that then goes
Yep.
into the Christian Bible, New Testament,
Yep.
is actually something that was borrowed and taken directly from what is called the Zoroastrian religion. And the Zoroastrians are still a religion. They're around today. They're considered one of the oldest religions in the world. They predate Judaism, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but someone can check that out. But they're from Persia, so the ancient Persians, before the Persians became Muslim, they were Zoroastrian. And when the Persians invaded, because of course Judea and the Levant and the Eastern Mediterranean had been
Yep.
conquered by the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, and then I think the Persians were right after, or they were right around the Greeks invaded them as well,
Yep.
like Alexander. And so people put their stories because people share things. And so this is why, like, it's very interesting that we're very aware in our society of cultural appropriation when people have been literally, like, appropriating people's culture since the dawn of time. And it's not to say
Mhm.
that's a good or a bad thing. It's just that's what happens. Like, the Persians came in, they conquered the area, and then there was like a mixing of stories. Like, people started to learn the predominant religion, which was Zoroastrianism, and certain people who were listening to these teachings listened to them, liked them, and incorporated it into Judaism, which then becomes a part of Christianity,
Right.
and maybe Islam as well. Again, I'm not as well versed as Islam, but you can see a trickle down effect, right? Where, people are just gathering again, and when a new dominant culture comes in, that new dominant culture becomes popular and becomes very
Mm.
influential. So
Right.
those ideas become popular and influential. The way people
Mm.
dress becomes popular and influential. So when the Persians came in, they were a massive, massive empire. They were like the coolest empire. They were like, you got to think of like how a lot in the past 50 years, how American culture has gone into Eastern Central Europe and the former Soviet Union, and people become Americanized, and they're eating McDonald's and they're drinking Coca-Cola and they're driving Fords. That was similar in the ancient world, where the Persians come in, they're a massive empire, they're cool, they're hip, they've got everything going for them. And some of these stories that they had in Zoroastrianism end up in Judaism. And we know this because of the application of biblical criticism. I don't know if people knew that necessarily, like, that information may have been lost for a while. But now that we have good anthropology and archaeological evidence, we can see some of these ideas. So it's one of these things where I, I think a lot of how we view these stories as literal has to do with how we're raised. And
Mhm.
I always sort of fear the people who sometimes all they know, like in the case in yourself, Marilyn, like, all you would have known at one point was the Bible is literally true. Why? Because it's true. Why? And then as soon as you get those
God
little
said it.
pieces of information, you do that pendulum swing where everything in the Bible is true, and then the next pendulum is everything in the Bible is false. That's not true. There are things historically in the Bible that may
Right.
have actually happened, surrounded itself by a lot of different cultural leanings and cultural borrowings, but also a lot of allegory. So, okay, we take Noah, for example. A flood myth is something that has been seen in the Sumerian culture, Egyptian cultures, Assyrian cultures. It probably got adapted into Noah. Okay, so, yes, a flood. There's a huge debate on whether the flood was supposed to be worldwide or just of the world that was the known world. Even
Right.
if there wasn't a flood, it doesn't matter because there's still something beyond that. Now, I know if we're going to go really scientific, we could say, well, there couldn't have been a worldwide flood because there was no marsupials on the ark. Nobody knew about marsupials back then. I get it,
Right.
but
Yeah.
these things have these things have just deeper allegorical meaning. And so it's almost somewhere where you're set up already as a child to believe in these literal things. You
Mhm.
get this information from scientific information, and people go to the other side. And to me, that's this whole idea that I like to say, which is, if we're healing, um, there's like 360 versus 180. So sometimes a lot of people, when they're trying to heal, they take a 360, which means they're back to the same place where they are. So nothing is true,
Right.
or everything is true in the Bible. Now nothing is true in the Bible. That's kind of a 360. But if we're taking a 180, then we can kind of look and explore a little bit differently. And that's kind of how I like to try to help people. If it helps for them, if it doesn't, that's fine. But there's just more meaning to it. And sure, it might not be literal, but that's also okay too, right? That may not have been the point. Who knows?
Yeah, just looking at some comments and questions here because I think they're, maybe we can kind of take them as we go along. That'd
Yeah.
be awesome.
But like, yeah, I mean, again, I know that a lot of because again, it's like, if we're taking the stories literally, then it's probably easy to say, like, again, with Noah's the biggest one, because it says that there's a worldwide flood. The earth itself was underwater, and he put two of every animal on an ark. Like, it seems ridiculous, that the predators didn't attack the prey, and like
Right.
how would you get to fruit flies? Like it doesn't make sense. But that's
Mhm.
because it's may have not even supposed to be a literal thing, right? If in some cases it seems not to make sense, it's probably because what's the underlying story of Noah? What are they trying? What were the writers trying to say
Right, right.
about Noah? Job is another one. I think Job, a lot of people think is a horrific story. I kind of agree
Mhm,
with that. It's very uneasy kind of a story. Like
mhm.
why would God kill an entire family of this guy just for faith? But it's
Yep,
not really about that. It's about at the end of the day how he's supposed to have faith. Like so again, we're looking beyond the literalness and taking the exact examples out of it. And so there's all those kinds of, things where if we just look behind a little bit, just peel the onion a
right.
little bit, we can, try to find the actual meaning of it. And a lot of that, by the way, is also interpreted by your own subjective interpretation of a
Mhm.
story. And it's no evidence to say that, one church or one priest or one minister knows exactly what's, in the Bible. And that's all cultic anyway. So,
Yeah, I remember just being told, "Don't ask questions." Like, there's something wrong with you if you don't believe. You're if you start asking questions about the Noah thing, it's like you have to believe this 100%, or else there's something wrong with you. And you had to accept that that really happened, and then talk about the implications of it, what that could mean that God is saying to you, because it's the word of God, right? Um,
right.
my problem was I was pretty young when I learned about all these stories, and
Hmm.
to think of them as literal and think of them as like God basically torturing this guy Job, who was righteous, who hadn't done anything wrong, right? But God,
Hmm.
just because the devil was taunting God, saying, I bet he'll curse you, I bet he'll turn on you, and then so God was like, oh yeah, well, hold my beer, and he just kept basically taking everything away from the guy, where he was like sitting in what, ashes and whatever it's called, sackcloth and ashes, with like boils from head to toe, and he still didn't curse God. So as a kid, or a teenager, excuse me, a young teenager, I'm thinking, that wasn't very nice. Do I really want to follow a God like this? And so to me, it was like Jonah and the whale. This guy got
Hmm.
literally, if you think of what that would feel like, not fun, got
No.
swallowed by, well, it says a great fish, but then a whale isn't really a fish. Whatever. We don't care, because it's, God said it, right? But think of why that happened to him, because he refused to go to Nineveh and preach hellfire and brimstone, So, and then there's a cute little song about that. Half note, inappropriate half, my friend knows those songs too. It's like all these little catchy songs. But if you actually think of it, it's like, it's traumatizing, you know?
Yeah.
It's
I
crazy.
wonder I wonder because again, when I was a kid, I never went to Sunday school, Hebrew school, nothing like that. So I always wonder how much scripture or how much uh, in the Christian tradition and even in other traditions in Islam and Judaism is just an excuse for parents and adults to just scare their children into behaving. And to me, that just is not a good thing. Like I'm not a parent, so I don't want to single splain parents here, because I know
Mhm.
parenting is not a hard job. And as I've gotten older, my sister's a parent, obviously my mom is a parent, right? So I've talked about stuff with them on things they might have done right and wrong, but in the end, it's a tough job. I don't know if I'll ever do it or have the will to do it, to be honest with you. But it's like there's got to be a better way than making God a third parent. You know what I mean? Like eat your vegetables, otherwise you're going to hell. Don't turn on the light on Friday night, otherwise you're going to, you're going to be God's going to punish you. It's like that instilling that kind of fear
Yeah,
into
he's like
someone
reverse
just to
Santa
do
Claus. Yeah, he's
something.
like, he sees you, he's watching
Yeah,
you. He's got a hammer, and
I don't
a
know.
guy
I
with a
just I
hammer in the sky.
wonder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like to me, making God the third parent is like, come on. Like, and I know that there are also a lot of people who don't do that, where church and stuff and religious is more joyous. But God,
Mhm.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
trauma that comes out of childhood religious experiences. And you're right, like the God is watching you type thing. It's like, man, like I don't know. So as an adult, and this is the sort of the difference. I again, being someone who's quite accountable here, quite clear, is that I didn't grow up with that kind of stuff. So like if I didn't do
Mhm.
something bad, it was my parents who would punish me. Maybe you could think in some far away place of judgment or whatever, sure, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like that. And then questioning on things like this, they were never really that hard on questioning. Questioning was okay because that was our interpretation. It was a more liberal interpretation of religion in my household, which is not good or bad. Maybe it has, maybe there are other trade-offs. Maybe it's as bad as, who knows, right? Because identity when you're in a liberal religion, and knowing who you are and where you come from can be very wishy-washy, so that takes a while to sort out. But at the same time, like, I don't know, I feel that some of the literal interpretations of these stories is just like to scare people straight. And I just think
Oh,
as a
totally.
kid
Yeah.
it might work in the short term, but as you get older it just explodes, and then people kind of, they're so traumatized. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, looking over my shoulder all the time and worried, like, if I got separated from my adoptive mom or my siblings, like in the grocery store, oh my God, the rapture happened. Now I'm going to have to get my head chopped off. So, because,
Jesus.
I missed it. I knew I was going to miss it, and I lived in fear. It was real. It was real to me
Yeah.
because we were told that this is real. This is reality. And I had youth group leaders in my church that would literally say, "We're going to scare you straight." And
Yeah.
they would play they would play rock music backwards and be like, "See, that says the devil is God," or whatever, "You gotta stay away from the devil's music." So, yeah, I was scared. I would have nightmares. I was, always feeling like I didn't measure up, and I resigned myself to basically going to hell at one point. So I was like, "Okay, well, then I might as well have fun doing it." So it was like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like you said, the two extremes, because you're hot or cold, or God will spew you out of his mouth. That's what the Bible says, you know.
Yeah, I
So
wonder. I wonder if it's a cultural thing, and very much an interpretation and an educational thing, because I find, it's not to say, again, I really don't want to be too specific, because like I hear this a lot from a lot of Americans. It's not that I don't hear it from other people, but you hear it a lot that in the United States there are so many of these groups that are like literal biblical literalists. And yes, we have them in Canada. Yes, there are them
right.
in Europe and
Yeah.
stuff, but I think by sheer
Mhm.
number of organizations and number of people, America has, almost 340 million people, and it's plus the pop culture.
Mhm.
America's kind of known for these religious conservatism and the religious right. But I do know so many people, and I just wonder if that's even something that like comes from the beginning of the America, the Puritans coming over and Protestants in England and Germany who couldn't
Yeah.
be their religion coming over, and the refugees. And so there's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack as a society. But as an individual, you can't control that. The only thing you can kind of control is like figuring out, okay, all right, here's a story that scared me as a kid. Okay, so if it's Noah, if it's Jonah, if it's whatever, right? If it's whatever, it's Job, and then trying to figure out, like, as an adult, okay, where does the story come from? Why would somebody tell this story? Even if it comes from God or not, what's the point of this story?
Yeah.
What is the moral of the story? If we're looking at allegories, if we're looking at metaphors, what is the deeper meaning to this? And then trying over like a long period of time to sort of rest with it and realize that like the people who were teaching you at Sunday school were literally just trying to scare you. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily why the people 2,000 or 5,000 years ago were sharing those stories. They were sharing those stories because they believed that there were meaning in it, that they gave their lives meaning, and that, okay, maybe some people took it literally, maybe some people didn't. But it really wasn't to scare children into behaving. That's not why people got around, it was adults who got around these fires who told stories. It was
Right.
not always children, and it was the scribes who also were adults, and then the elders and so forth. So it's like some of these stories are literally probably not even meant for children. They're
Mhm.
meant for adults. And that's the horrific thing. It's like you got to think about it.
Yeah.
Imagine if the Bible itself, every chapter of every story, came with a rating, and like, well, that's rated R. Job is rated R, but this other one is rated PG. Like, that's kind of what it's like, because that was their
Yeah.
movies and their entertainment and their TV shows at the time. And
Mhm.
some of them were for children, and some of them were not. Some of them were
Yeah, I think of
18
so
plus.
many and I think of so many cultures and religions and, traditions that if you read their stories or watch their behavior, look analyze their behavior, there's so much, appeasing of a god, whether it's
Yeah,
many gods or one god or whatever. It's like, you look at Greek mythology and all these, different, philosophies and everything, is a lot of the stories that I learned were, basically like tales of like cautionary tales, right? You don't want to be like
sure.
Jonah, so you better obey God.
Yeah,
And what is God like? Well, according to those stories, he's kind of not nice. He's jealous, he's spiteful, he's vindictive, and his way or the highway, you know
yeah.
so yeah, what's fun
It's a
about
dick.
that?
I know, it's true. It's a dick. I know, from a lot of, my friends who are Christian, they'll say when they read, in the Bible, of course, the Old and New Testament, which again, we say the Hebrew Bible, Christian Bible, but if they read the Old Testament, there's like something happens to God by the time the New Testament happens, because now he's all loving and benevolent and he's a single father, and maybe he's chilled out or something. But like, yeah, when you read like the Torah and you read the book of the prophets and all that kind of stuff in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, yeah, he's an asshole. I mean, and that's not necessarily, I think, something that it may or may not have been calculated. It's hard to know. Like, did
Yeah.
all the writers decide God was going to be an asshole and be terrible? And like, I don't know. Like, these are questions that we can say yes and
Yeah.
no and well. It's obvious that this, but it's again, it's like not even known why. Like all of the stories were collected, so they never appeared together for a long, long time. That's
Right.
another thing. Like all of these books were books. They were separated books that people were and oral transmitting and writing down, and then they became collected into what we know. And so when we read it in a narrative structure, which was what we're used to, it looks like
Mhm.
development of some complete asshole. But like at the same time, that might not have even how it was supposed to necessarily be read. It's just that's the
Yeah.
collection of how it
Yeah, and
came
I
to
think it's
be,
a
you
I think
know?
it was an attempt to answer some questions, right? That we
Yeah,
all have.
absolutely.
Where do we come from? Why do bad things happen? You know?
Yeah,
What are we here for? What are we supposed to be doing? What's gonna happen when we die?
yeah,
So
yeah.
those are all things, and like you said, there's so many cultures that came before Christian cultures,
Mhm.
that whether it's Judaism or the New Testament, um, that Christianity borrowed from. Like I've heard, I
Yeah,
don't really know the backstory of this, but uh, Christianity wasn't the first to come up with the story of a virgin birth, of a
that's true.
savior.
That is true. Yeah.
Do you know like where that came from?
It's a translation, because the same word in ancient Greek for virgin is also little girl. But the idea of a Messiah has been around for a long time. In fact, one of the reasons why in Judaism we don't accept Jesus as the Messiah is because there there had been people not only at the time of Jesus but before the time of Jesus who claimed to be the Messiah, and they failed the scratch and sniff test. And so really strong Orthodox
Right.
Jews are still, they may be waiting for the Messiah, but eventually the more what is called Reform Judaism, so that's the most liberal branch, and Conservative Judaism, which is the most moderate branch and middle branch, got rid of that a while ago, because it's like the point of religion was not always to wait for the Messiah. Now, I do want to say there are many Christian churches who that might be in the back of their mind. It might be in the front of their mind, but it also might be in the back of their mind because there's the stories and the teachings of Jesus and the belief in God and how you treat other people that might be a bit more, emphasized than necessarily. And maybe, yeah, maybe he will come back, but obviously, most churches would say he hasn't yet. And so in Judaism, there
Right.
was a complete abandonment of the Messiah. But that's
Mhm.
just from our perspective. Again, if you're a Christian and you believe Jesus is coming back, okay, there's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with that. That's part of your faith. That's part of your religion. It depends on how literally you take that. Are you harming people and hurting people and defrauding people? Okay, then we have a problem. But just to believe in it, to have your own faith, there's nothing wrong.
Right.
But there was also that. Yeah, there was also virgin birth,
Mm.
messiahs, like almost everything that you find in our Western Abrahamic text will have like a Zoroastrian origin, Sumerian origins, Babylonian, Assyrians. And again, it's not
Mm.
because it's 100% false. That
Right.
misses the point completely. Not because it's 100% true and only the Judeo-Christian, whatever that's supposed to mean. It's not really a term, Judeo-Christian, but let's just use it. Only that's the real truth. Well, that's missing the point too. It's just that cultures, this is what cultures do. This is just basic anthropology.
Right.
It has nothing to do with religion. It's just there's a separate study where
Yeah.
people study cultures and civilizations, and we know that there's a mixing of that, and that's not a bad
Yeah.
thing. You know.
Well, the whole concept
Mhm.
of and this is something, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
I would learn things as a kid and as an adult and just accept them as true, right?
Yeah.
And that our version of Christianity was the truth. And there were other things that were false, false prophets, false, narratives, false everything, right? But God was this was our truth. This is the true way.
Yeah.
Now, when they talk about Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the
Mhm.
Father but by me, I always thought of him as God. He's fully God, he's fully human, but he's also part of the Trinity, right? That's what we learned. Okay. Um, then when I hadn't left the cult yet, but I was starting to ask questions and wonder about things, once things started to unravel. And I was talking to my father-in-law. He's, God rest his soul. He's been gone for a while, but just a really nice guy, very much like my husband. He's just my husband's very much like his dad. And at one point he said, because he was Methodist, went to church all his entire life, very, very,
Mhm.
he's in the choir and very involved. But he said, he's like, I mostly go to church just for the social aspect of it and the community. I like that. And he said, I really don't buy into this whole human sacrifice thing. And I was like, what do you mean? And he looked at me, he's like, Jesus? And I'm like, I never thought of him as a human sacrifice. I mean,
Mhm.
here I am in my mid 30s and I had never thought of that. And I know of human sacrifice. I know of like paganism and Satanism and all that. But no, we have the truth. Jesus died for our sins.
Mhm.
He's the savior. He's the Messiah. But he also was a human sacrifice, you know?
Yeah.
So never thought of it that way. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, I think if anyone is coming out like of because Scientology is one of those things where like if you're coming out of Scientology, it's good to talk to ex-Scientologists, obviously, but there's not really another denomination other than the independents, and that's it. But if you're coming out of
Right.
like
Gotcha.
a Pentecostal cult, like, yeah, you can talk to like a mainstream Methodist and your mind would be blown because it's such a different thing. Or you can
Yeah.
talk to a Lutheran or a Catholic and you have so many more varieties where I know people who are ex-Mormons and when they leave, they'll talk to different there's a group called the Community of Christ, which is used to be called the Reorganized Church. So they talk to them, but then they'll talk to like evangelicals and Baptists and Catholics said like, "Hey, this is our scripture. Why is it wrong according to you?" And then they'll get like a good basis, right? So
Right.
that's a good thing is to discuss with other people. And you'll notice that if you're in a group like that, everything is very homogenous. Your beliefs are homogenous, your culture are homogenous, your prayer, your thoughts, everything's one way. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, well, here's your father-in-law being a Methodist. In the Methodist tradition, there's a lot of different varieties of Methodists. There's liberals, there's mainline, there's conservatives, and they all have a different interpretation, and they're all going to have a
Yeah.
different perspective. And as individuals, you're right. Maybe there are just people who just like going to church because they like going to church. All the beliefs and all that are secondary. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
big part of why they go,
I
but it's
know, it's
secondary. Whereas
shocking.
some churches, yeah, it's like, but you go because
Yeah.
you believe, and you might hate everybody, but you go because you believe. And that's actually what Scientology is like,
Yeah, right.
you
Well, like,
know?
when he was saying that, I was like waiting for the lightning bolt, it's like, how could you
Yeah.
even say that, because we were, we were taught, do not question. No, no way. So I've quite a few things starred. Georgie's in the background, starring things. I had a couple things I wanted to put up first. This was, I think, a really good comment from Cricket Cinema. It's not possible to translate something without changing it. Just saying. So, like you were saying about the
Absolutely correct.
virgin.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, because again, we have so in the Torah, so there's always those different viewpoints. Like, was there historical Moses? Wasn't there? My whole thing is, even if there wasn't a Moses, it doesn't matter, because there's still traditions that are over 5,000 years old. We just celebrated Rosh Hashanah, and the year in the Jewish calendar is 5785. That's pretty significant and
Yeah,
extraordinary. So
yeah.
to me, it doesn't matter if there was a Moses or not. That's not everything about it. It's that there's still a series of these traditions that have been around for a very long time. And so I do those traditions. I like it. Do I believe in them? Sure. But like, again, it's more like because of the age and the survival and all this kind of stuff. At the same time, it would have been written in a very specific kind of Hebrew. And also,
Hmm.
we have prayers in Judaism. One of the most famous prayers is called the Mourner's Kaddish, which is the prayer for the dead, which is actually in Aramaic, which is the language that Jesus spoke. So, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like, these are ancient languages. They're not the same as modern languages. And yeah, things will and from ancient Hebrew to some were writing in Greek and different forms of Hebrew, and then German, and then English, of course. And that's why the most honest answer is not to shove, a Gideon's Bible or a New International Bible, or even we have what's called Art Scroll, Tanakh or Torah in someone's face and say this is the
Hmm.
literal word of God. It's like, it's in English. You know what I mean? Like, the English we speak is only a few hundred years old. It goes,
Right.
it goes
Yeah.
back and it goes back. The English of William the Conqueror and all this kind of stuff. Like it's in English, man. Like, it's not the literal word of God. It's in modern English. So we have to obviously take all those things with a grain of salt as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Nina scrolling around. Hey there. Have any of you seen
Yeah.
or read The Pagan Christ?
I've heard of it. Um, if Nina, if you can remind me who the author is. I think I remember. It's like it's on the tip of my tongue and my head who the author is. But that is also true. A lot of characteristics that became Christianity may have been borrowed to appease pagans that were like in Rome and especially in Germany. So things like Easter and Christmas. Like, I think um, if we really were I think like Jesus was supposed to be born in like the spring, but we celebrate Christmas in December, and it's because of a I guess a negotiation with the German pagans. So there's all
Right.
these kind of things that
Okay.
happen after the fact when certain groups that the Romans were trying to convert, they had to make some conveniences and some negotiations with these groups to get them into the fold, and the
Interesting.
calendar changed and some characteristics changed as well. So that happens too.
Yeah.
It's a shame that people don't tell children about this stuff, either because they're unaware of it, probably. But that's like, if you told, I would say, if you told a lot of children, like, hey, this right away, like, these stories are not always true. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And
Hmm.
hey, some of these stories were already taught in pre-cultures. I don't think you would get such a traumatic, decades long of just trauma and surprise, and
Yeah.
because it really hurts. It really hurts people. I think if you just start when you're a kid to just be like, yeah, some of this came from other cultures, and it might not literally be true, but here it is. This
Oh
is
my
what we believe.
goodness.
You know, Can you imagine how peaceful
Waiting for the
it
lightning
could have
bolt.
been?
So it's like,
I
you know,
know.
when I read Stasia,
Yeah.
if the Bible is the word of God, he's a crappy writer. Oh, I can't say that.
just like LRH. I would say God is probably a better influencer than LRH.
A better
Certainly,
influencer.
LRH is not a great writer, but let me just say there are worse writers.
He is in the Guinness Book of World. It didn't say the best writer, it just says the
Yeah,
most prolific writer.
prolific, most translated. Yeah,
Yeah,
most
I think
prolific.
God can give him a run for his money.
I think so. It's a good comment.
Inappropriate half. Mark is saying everything that I've thought before. Yeah, what do you think about this half?
Oh,
Because we were taught this is
yeah.
like, whoa, no, no.
And again, please understand that there are Christian churches and other religions that do Sunday school very differently. And a lot of
Mhm.
it has to do with what denomination you're a part of, what culture you're in, and what country you're in as well. And it's
Yeah,
very like, it's really, really one of these things where sometimes you just get a bad hand, at poker, and that hand will screw you up for the rest of the game. And
right.
sometimes you're lucky, you get a great hand and you win the pot, and it really sucks. And this is why my whole message is 180 versus 360, because we get a hand and you got to play the hand you're dealt somehow. And yes, some people will get better hands than you. It sucks. Just imagining if you were in a church that again said, not all of this is literal. Some of this
Right.
stuff came from other cultures.
Yeah.
You'd already have that
Mhm.
basis of foundation where you might ward off 2 decades or longer of
Yeah, and
complete trauma and agony,
right,
and
emphasizing things
resolution.
like God is love instead of God is
Yeah,
like an angry, jealous
exactly.
God. Yeah,
And I
yeah,
know it sucks. Believe me, it's not anyone's fault. It's not your fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's not your grandparents' fault. It's just the hand that you're dealt. And so this is why now, as we are adults, we've got to sometimes take a couple steps back and kind of figure out and learn and then make those steps forward. And also the
mhm,
people you associate with as adults, because there's a lot of people. I don't want to mention too many names or group names, but there's a lot of anti-religious groups out there and like anti-Christian groups, and they literally profit on your pain and your agony, and they just keep you in that horrible cycle of anti-religion and everyone is stupid and this kind of
mhm.
stuff that I've experienced, and that's even worse. So
Right,
free
yeah,
yourself from those people too.
absolutely. Yeah, and we're not here to knock any religion or Christianity
Exactly.
or anything like that. Totally,
No, nothing
totally
like
get
that.
that.
But again,
Okay.
there's a lot of toxicity out there, so just be careful,
Yeah,
religion and
absolutely.
non.
Yeah, James still says, question, were all the books written by men? Well, it depends.
Probably.
Yeah, it depends what you think. Yeah.
I think that in the end, right? Even if God revealed stuff to Moses, I still think that in the end, Moses or some group around Moses would have, if Moses was literal, would have written it down. And so in Judaism, the three different aspects of the Torah, Reform tends to believe that it was only written by people, and so it's imperfect. The conservative movement, which I'm in, would say that like people were divinely inspired, but it's ultimately imperfect. And then if you're Orthodox, it was literal. And so, just me personally, I just can think, okay, the people who, like, if there was a Moses or if there was people who created Moses or whatever, they were probably inspired by their faith and this new thing called Judaism. And whether or not there was there were the Ten Commandments that went up to Mount Sinai, it really doesn't matter. They were somehow inspired by who they were and this developing idea. And then they ultimately wrote it down as people. So there is an element of not being literal. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe it is a complete literal text translation, but that's just what I think.
Yeah, well, it's all open to interpretation now to me. And it
Exactly.
wasn't before, you know,
I
but
know. I know. Sad, right?
yeah. So I'm just gonna read down some comments. Peter Anderson, Pete Panzerotti, Mark Turi has to get one over on Griff Cows.
Yep.
I love that.
We do. We do.
That's
I
too
invented
funny.
or should I say, Pete Panzerotti invented me about a year ago, Halloween, when we did our Halloween special from the Nerdy Bunch.
Yeah,
So
that's
I've been
funny.
doing him every once in a while. People love him. He's got a very thick Chicago accent, which
Yeah, I
people
know.
love. And
I
people
love
from
it.
Chicago love it. So I'm actually really happy about that. I just think it's a ridiculous accent, but I love it. And people love it. So we're going to probably do one on Halloween. So look out for
I
that
love
one.
Chicago too. I've been there. Beautiful city.
Chicago's great. Yeah, Chicago's a great city.
Yeah, and
Great
I
pizza.
like that there's a lot of protesting going on there because Yeah. I was
Yeah,
there I was there about
that's right.
6 months before they opened their well, maybe more like a year before they opened that org, and it was this big, beautiful, old,
Oh, wow.
empty building.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's
Yep,
still pretty big,
and
beautiful, old, empty building.
it's yeah, it's still a big it's still empty, believe me, I know
Yeah,
from Berlin.
yeah.
I
So
know ideal
Stationery
orgs. Yeah, yeah.
right. Spirit said, "Mark, this is potentially the first time I've been willing interested to see PowerPoint presentations." Well, there you
Right,
go.
right.
Head on over
Hop
and
on, and if something interests you, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, we got Mark Turi. It's at Mark Turi 123. Look him up, subscribe. Like he's got so
I
you're
if I
streaming
have
to
a
your channel. So
yeah, I'm streaming my channel right now, and yeah, I'm at thanks to Marilyn, I got up to my 50 subscriber, so I could do, I
thanks
guess,
to
lives
all
or whatever,
yeah,
which is
thanks to
amazing. So if
the viewers
anyone out
here.
there, my next goal is 500. I'm around 80 or 85. So
Okay.
I think it's doable. I hope I can grow and get monetized in the future and have
Well,
more things
let's get
going.
let's get you to
So I
100
would
today.
really like to. Yeah, I would. That would be
Yeah.
great. That would be amazing. One goal at a time.
That's right. So let me
Thanks,
paste
everybody.
your link in the chat and yeah, head on over and subscribe. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah, we have I'm very happy. I have a really great group of regulars, and everyone is really civil, which is really nice. Some people disagree. They give me the reasons why. I also have other videos that I did with the Nerdy Bunch and stuff, and other people who's not a part. I don't think they're a part of the SPTV community at all have come on, but everyone's been fine. I haven't really
Yeah,
had to ban anybody, so it's been nice, and
good.
I'm doing what I love, so it's good.
I love it. Awesome.
Yeah,
So Kathy Scoggins says, I've tried multiple religions in my life, but never stayed with one. I always found something
yeah,
in them that didn't make sense to me. And it's got another part to it.
yeah.
The last one was the Jehovah's Witnesses. I left after they
Wow.
told me I had to disconnect from my brother and nephew because they are gay.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That's awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really ridiculous. Yeah. Don't anyone, anyone that's like that homophobic or transphobic or whatever, just they're not worth your time. It's just those are all awful discrimination, and it's also very normalized in a lot of cultures too, and they're not worth your time anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I was raised as well. And when I got out into the world and, met a lot of people in the LGBTQ community, I was like, these are the nicest. They're so nice and very level headed and normal. And I'm not,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, that just really, it pissed me off, honestly.
Yeah.
That I was taught to I mean, I won't say I hated them as a kid, but I was taught that they're, look down on them like, "Oh, they're going to hell." You know, those poor
Right.
people,
Yeah, they're
which
othering, right? They're the others.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Freeze an Eagle is my hubby. Go on over and subscribe to Freeze an Eagle too. You've got to check your brain in at the door right out of the gate. Yeah, that's what it's like in a cult,
Sometimes. Yeah. It can be like that, I know. Sometimes I think that's a little too generalized, and it becomes kind of a meme, but there also have to understand that there are a lot of religions where the whole checking your brain at the door thing doesn't actually exist. It's just something people say because some religions might be like that. Like
Right.
my
Right.
analogy is if you if you go to like a church that has like a big mega church and it's all based around music and entertainment, right? But then there are also churches like in the Calvinist tradition that are super, super intellectual. They really study theology and in Judaism and so forth. So it's almost like going to see a Marvel movie versus going to see some indie movie, an art house film. It's like, yeah, we like to be entertained. So there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, you can't say everything is like that because it's true for some, it's not true for others. I like explosions in my movies, but I also like quiet dramas too.
Right.
People are not people are not one or the other, so who knows?
Exactly. Uh, George says, as a kid, everything is literal and visualized, which can be traumatic. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it can. Sadly, so sad. I don't know.
Yeah. Uh, Stasia, maybe God meant park instead of ark, a place for the animals to hang out. There you go.
See, that would make more sense, actually.
I know. And there's a little song
An
about
off-leash park.
it. Yeah, this is a little Sunday school song that I learned too. It was like, God told Noah to build him an arky arky.
I mean,
It just
I
seems
know that
like,
from The Simpsons.
oh, really?
The Flanders sing it in The Simpsons. Yeah,
Oh,
they're
that's
trying to convert Homer,
hilarious.
I think, or Bart. Anyway, it's hilarious. And they sing that song.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's one about Jonah and the whale too.
Back on the Arky Ark. Yeah.
Children
Simpsons, yeah.
of the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
they
animals,
sing a
they
lot of
sing.
the Flanders do a lot of preaching to The Simpsons
Oh, it's
in
so
The
funny.
Simpsons, and it's so the only reason I know that's
That's great. We're just rolling down here. Hey, Gretchen only, Dr. Gretchen, great to see you. In my opinion, I think there are many positives to Christianity, but I have not liked the use of enemy in the serve.
yeah.
Yeah. These days, I have a chosen path of spirituality and living kind, compassionate life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
See,
can
that
say it
us
any better.
versus them stuff irks me too.
Us versus them. Yeah. Yep.
Hmm.
Enemy to, divide and conquer,
Satan.
isolate. Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
everything is good is God, everything is bad is Satan.
Yep. Yep. We got CO Bilf here. Marilyn origin story. Okay. Only she could remove the crochet needle of destiny from the goldenrod stone. There you go. Yeah. So I got my own origin story. Thank you very much. That's great. Oh, Peter Anderson talking about your chat. We talked about ethnic food in Hungary before the chat yesterday. The popular ethnic food is Italian food, but they put
Yep.
corn on their pizza.
Yep.
Who?
Yeah, in Hungary, we put like a canned sweet corn or not sweet corn, but like a canned kernel corn. And they put it usually like we call it Hungarian pizza is usually it's usually corn, some kind of bell pepper, usually red bell pepper, green bell pepper, and then also sausage or something like that. And it's like for me, I'm a pineapple on my pizza type person, but I don't cross the line with corn. Like that's too much for me, which is really
Duncan,
weird,
I think would love that.
right?
My
Because some
husband,
people can't do pineapple, right? Like you go to Italy
I
and
like
they'll
pineapple.
yell at you if you want pineapple on your pizza, which I got. Like I was in Italy this summer, so I didn't wasn't going to screw with that. But I don't know, corn is too much. Like even like broccoli or something they do in San Francisco, okay, but corn, it just I
Wow.
can't do it.
Duncan would love that. He likes canned corn. He buys a lot of chickpeas and
Yeah.
corn, and we even have a
Yeah.
little song about it that we pick on him about it. We're just
I used to
like,
get like a pre-baked pie crust, and you just
yeah,
put
he
the
just loves
it's just a
corn.
crust, and then you can put your own tomato sauce, and then you just put a can of corn, you just put it around, put it in the oven, take it out, and there you go. You got a Hungarian pizza.
All right, I'll have to
Very
tell him.
bizarre.
Hey,
My people are weird, let me tell you. Hungarian has the weird language. We got a weird culture. We're really weird people. And then we have
in
corn on
UK,
pizza.
we eat corn on pizza? I've never heard of
Oh,
this.
you do too? Okay. So corn on
Blasphemy.
pizza,
Wow.
you know. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
European thing now. I mean, who knows? I haven't really seen it outside of Hungary, but who knows? It's really
We've
weird.
got the fabulous Joe to step
Oh,
up.
hey, Joe, my friend Joe.
Hey there.
Yes, she's in England as well.
Yep,
Very
that's right.
proper.
Yep. And Have says, my daughter's sending me food pics from Italy. I know I'm dying so good.
I
Yeah.
know. I had the best pizza and gelato of my life in Ravenna, and then I went to Trieste and I had pizza, and the Neapolitan pizza there is unbelievable. All and it's margarita, so all it is
Oh yeah,
just
yeah.
tomato sauce,
So
cheese,
simple.
and it's the greatest thing in the
Okay.
world.
Yeah, I have a friend from
Oh,
Naples. Her name's Antonella, and
okay.
she's taught me how to make pasta sauce. And it was so simple. It's
Mhm.
just Roma tomatoes, just all chopped up and really small. And then you
Yep.
take olive oil, put it in the pan, and get it nice and
Mhm.
hot. She throws in sliced garlic and just mixes it around a little bit.
Ooh.
Everything's done with a wooden spoon, and
Yes.
fishes
Yes.
them out to infuse the oil. Throws in
Mm,
the tomatoes, turn into hot tomatoes, and then a little bit of
right.
basil to finish it with salt, and that's it. And it's like,
Yep.
it's so good. It's so simple.
And you know the problem with
So good.
store-bought pasta sauce and tomato sauce is tons of sugar and salt, which you don't need. You could just from fresh tomatoes,
Oh,
that's it, and a little bit of tomato paste, and it's really, like, really bad if you're diabetic or anything, or you have some health conscious or whatever, but you can make your own pasta sauce. It doesn't take that long, and if it's fresh, it's great, and it'll taste even
mhm.
better when you make your own food.
Yeah, it is. It's like so simple too. Like,
Yeah.
people ask me for my beef stew recipe because my husband loves it, and I use the original Betty Crocker recipe, which is
Mhm.
simple.
Sure,
You don't put all this spice in it or wine or anything, and um,
sure.
I just put a lot less salt than they call for it because if you look
Of
at those
course.
old recipes, oh my god, the salt and the sugar is
Yeah,
unbelievably strong.
I
Yeah, it's
know.
crazy.
I that's one thing I would love to go is go back in time to a 1950s diner in the 50s in America and just eat some pie because that thing would have been full of lard. It would have been so good, even though lard is animals and whatever. I get it.
Yeah,
I don't like to eat pork or whatever, or even animal fat, but lard, I mean, I still remember my grandmother making cookies with lard when we were a
yeah,
kid.
but
Oh my
saying
god, it was
lard, the word itself is, like,
I
offensive to
know,
me.
but it's so delicious, and people used to fry chicken.
Lard.
When I was growing up, Kentucky Fried Chicken was fried in lard, and then they switched in the '90s, at least, they switched to vegetable oil, which, of course, is better, but lard, come on, it's
Yeah.
delicious.
Yeah, but then we
I
can
know, it's so
go into
bad,
that
but it's
another day.
good.
Hydrogenated oil and all that, that's not
I
too good
know,
either.
that's why people, unfortunately had so many health issues when we grew up in,
Yeah.
mid-century, but the food
Speaking
was
of
good.
health issues, say God probably had better teeth than LRH.
Yeah, the LRH, yeah.
Well,
Went to
God
a dentist
invented
once
teeth.
and
Yeah, he
yeah,
invented
there's a
teeth.
whole thing about that, him and the dentist, so
Mhm.
it's whack.
We got Nikita Snook, 519 comment. My mother
Yeah,
taught me that the book of Genesis was allegory.
cool.
Yeah,
Reform,
the
yeah.
history began at Exodus. Also, reform Joe
I
here.
think she means Reformed Jew, not Joe, but I could be wrong.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Reformed Judaism, yeah, it's
Yep.
allegorical and stuff like that, and when you go to Hebrew school, there's a big division, again, between all these different interpretations. That's why, one
Right.
single interpretation, I understand when someone grows up, especially in a very kind of isolated, very conservative kind of household, you might think, well, every religion sees the Bible the certain way and so forth, but there's
Right.
a lot of diversity in theology and so forth. And, again, it's that hand that you're dealt, and it's just something you have to sort of unteach yourself and relearn and all this kind of thing. So, can be hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It can be difficult.
Right. So Bodhi says, yes, in Sweden, with our clear shifts of seasons, it's obvious that we must have had holidays at Christmas and Easter, midwinter, and
Mhm.
spring even day. Hmm.
Yeah, and I went to Sweden when I was 16, and, it was during midsummer, and so they had blacked out curtains, and I remember waking up at, like, 1 or 2 in the morning, and it was during midsummer, and I opened the curtains, and it was completely bright outside, like it was the afternoon, and it was 1 or 2 AM, and it was
Hmm.
so weird, it was so freaky, but that's what happens when we have this in Canada too, more up in the north, but yeah, it was just my first time experiencing the midsummer, and it was just wow. It
Hmm.
was really, really interesting. 1,
Wow.
2 in the morning and having like a clear sky, sun out. It
Yeah,
was
that's
amazing.
wild. That's
It's really
wild.
crazy. Yeah, it's kind
Right.
of cool.
So my Sharona says this is a great collab. I agree. I
Oh,
really
thank
enjoy
you.
this. I like to learn things and surround myself with smart people. So that's what I like to do. Uh, Pagan NYC. I'm not sure. Pagan NYC. Comment. Orthodox Judaism does not believe that the Torah, how do you say it?
Torah.
Torah should be taken literally. Well, that's good to know.
Depends on the school. I think if you're talking more like modern Orthodox, and maybe there are different schools and
Hmm.
things like that. But generally speaking, and again, this is why speaking generally, there's always someone who's going to have an exception, which is again is okay. But normally in Orthodox Judaism, it's that God did give the Torah to Moses literally. And so, yeah, maybe there isn't a non-literal interpretations depending on the rabbi, depending on the school, depending on the congregation, but certainly there's a mix, put it that way. And as I said, I just was mainly using generalities because again, it's hard to know. Like within
Right.
Orthodox, you have modern Orthodox, Hasidic Orthodox, ultra Orthodox. You have a whole bunch of different cultures and religions and schools, and it does get complicated. So it's not that's not necessarily a wrong comment. It's just that there's a lot. I was trying to say a lot more, and also being general at the same time. So completely understood.
Gotcha. Gotcha. George Massey wants to know, isn't there a flood story in Greek mythology that aligns with the story of Noah, the Deucalion flood?
Colin, probably. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there wasn't a lot of different cultures in Egypt. I think maybe too. I think in Babylon there's a lot of stuff. So probably, you know,
Mhm.
lots
Gotcha.
of crossover.
Mhm. Stay Spira, if you're sitting around your house playing your albums backwards, you are Satan. You need it look any further and you don't go ruining my stereo to prove a point either. Bill Hicks. All right then.
Bill Hicks, yeah, great comedian. Lost him way too young.
No, no, I hate that. Um Stay Spirit, many chapters of the Bible would absolutely not make it past the censors.
Yep.
Absolutely, especially nowadays, that's for sure.
Hmm.
And Sage says, worship me or else. Yeah, that sounds a little bit narcissistic. That's what I used to say.
Sure, fine, whatever. That's most my response to a narcissist is just
Yeah.
making it completely unimportant, right? Yeah, whatever. Okay, sure.
Yeah, well, Doug Kramer and I would talk about that. Like, doesn't God kind of sound like a narcissist according to the Bible? I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, not to pick on Christianity if that's your thing, but
exactly.
yeah, it's like he's a little bit of a egomaniac, and according to what
Mhm.
I've learned now that I know better,
True,
you know.
true.
Yeah, so that whole worship me or else thing. Yeah. We got a question. Okay. From Nina. How does the majority of people react in the US if you say you don't believe in a God? For Scandinavian, it's strange to see how much religion is such a big part of one's identity. Yeah, 100%.
I think it
I think
depends
it's
on where
changed a
you
little,
are,
I think.
right?
What's that?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you are in the United
Yeah,
States. I can certainly say if you're in like a major urban center, nobody cares.
yeah,
But if you're in like the Bible Belt, a very religious community,
yeah,
there would be written off as just being untrustworthy and kind of
yeah.
evil and stuff like this, which is so stupid.
I'd be like, "Oh,
Um,
my
because
pearls." Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
who cares whether you believe in something or not? It doesn't determine, in my opinion, your actions. But I think a lot
Right,
of that is the sad part of that religious indoctrination where if you believe in something, like if you have faith in whatever it is, then you're a good person by consequence, which doesn't to me make sense.
right,
You know what I mean? And then if you
yeah,
don't believe, it means you have to be the opposite. Whereas, like in Scandinavia, you're right. And again, as someone who's been to Sweden and been to Scandinavia, it's like very like 4% of Swedes go to church on Sunday. Although a lot of people identify as Christians, it's very relaxed, and they may only go to church like for weddings and stuff. So it's like not even really that much culturally significant. And like yeah, it's exactly like it might just be a byproduct. You might be like, no, you're Swedish is more important than being Christian if you are one, right? But yeah,
right.
it's I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that America was founded by religious refugees, and then
Mhm.
after that point, a lot of Protestants, especially and Catholics, came over as refugees, especially Jews. So from the 1600s to the late 1900s, or to the late, yeah, well, to the early 1900s, the early 20th century, there were a lot of people that could not live in Europe anymore, and so they were refugees. Like they couldn't live in Germany or France or wherever, or England especially, and so they came to America where they could literally just do whatever the hell they wanted in one sense. And then that kind of allowed a lot of like isolation and a lot of intensity to spring up over their religious beliefs because there wasn't an institution, like there wasn't a king, there wasn't a priest, there wasn't anything like a hierarchy telling them to chill out, which is
Right,
what was happening in Scandinavia and otherwise. Like if a religious denomination anywhere was getting too crazy, you either chilled the f out or you went to America, which is what basically happened in England.
Right.
And even in Sweden, a lot of Swedish Catholics moved to America because they couldn't chill out.
Mm.
They were really Catholic, and then they were sent across the pond. And America absorbed all of that stuff. So you gotta kind of put your mind and head in that space. Norwegian Americans, Finnish Americans, Danish Americans, Swedish Americans. Yes, many Protestants, but a lot of Catholics, like lots. And of course, they didn't feel welcome where they were. So, and then America
Mm.
absorbed all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this was really interesting. Nita's Nook. Remember, Judaism was the first monotheistic religion in the midst of other religions with many gods. Yeah, what do you think about that? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as far as I know, um, and I've taken classes on this on the origins of the Jewish people, like in an undergrad. So not in a. I haven't gone to theology school like it's like a regular public undergrad. Is that way back in time? There was a group called the Phoenicians, and they became people like the ancient Egyptians and the Carthaginians and the Berbers. And some of them went to what is called the Levant today, so parts of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Egypt, and Jordan. And you will know one of those groups were called the Canaanites.
Hmm.
And it looks like the Hebrew people descend from a group of Canaanites. And what we were distinguished by the fact that we chose monotheism and everyone else was polytheistic. But originally, when that idea was going to be formed, we weren't necessarily strict monotheists. There are some early writings, and especially from the very predominant Jewish and one of the first ever Jewish historian whose name was Josephus. So we were
Hmm.
probably
Yep.
what's called monolatrists. So we would have acknowledged that we worshiped one God, but that the other Canaanite groups and the other ancient Levantians and the Greeks that were in what's today the Gaza Strip, they were the
Yep.
Palestinians and so forth, Philistines. So they would have had their other gods, but we simply chose to worship one God. And then after a while, it became more strictly monotheistic. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the other groups that you read were polytheist, and we just decided to have our one, and it discerned us. It made us different from our neighbors, and that's one of the beginning of our
Yeah.
discrimination, but also the beginning of our survival. So
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And, just thinking about how a lot of other religions have different gods and they represent different, like personality traits or different
yeah.
things like seasons or whatever. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then this idea of God, well, God in three persons, right? Because it goes Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but all God. Um, Again, it kind of does set up a little bit of confusion, even in the Judeo-Christian that doesn't, or the Judaism doesn't believe in, Jesus, obviously, but
Yeah.
or the Holy Spirit. I'm not sure, but we can get into that another day. I'm not sure, but God is
I
God,
don't know
right?
much
Just
about
one.
that personally.
Yeah. So it's just God is God. It's just one
True.
deity. Okay.
Yeah, so they're in the 18th century, 19th century here in Hungary, and also east of us in Transylvania. There was a group of Christians that started, and actually even before that, sorry, 16th century. I'm so wrong. There was something called the Diet of Torda. Torda is a used to be my last name, Torda,
Oh,
and it's near a city called Cluj-Napoca, which we call Kolozsvár. And a group of Christian Protestants got together and said, "We don't believe in the Trinity anymore. We only believe in one." And they're called Unitarians. And there's still a lot of Hungarian Unitarians who live in Transylvania.
hmm.
The Unitarians and Universalists got together in America in the
I was gonna
60s.
say, I think
They
of the
stem from the
Unitarian
idea.
Universalists are very, very
Exactly.
liberal. Yeah.
Yeah, very. And again,
Yeah.
the idea of the Unitarian Christianity is more like Judaism, where they just believe in one God. They don't believe in the Trinity. At least that's traditional. So there's some overlap there, but we would be considered, I guess, Unitarians as well in some
Yeah.
way if you wanted to, bend rules and
Right.
history. So that's our
Right.
kind of our theology. There's just one God.
Yeah. This is a really good comment. The pilgrims fled England to escape persecution
Yeah.
and then
Yes.
persecuted everyone they met. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
they did.
Yeah.
Especially the indigenous peoples, but yeah. And you can go to when I was in the Netherlands, anyone who's American who might be interested, you can go to the city of Leiden, which is a very beautiful city in the south. It's near The Hague. It's sort of south of Amsterdam, and you can go to a wonderful museum called the Mayflower Museum because the Pilgrims purchased the Mayflower from Leiden and then sailed over, and they have a really incredible, rich history and stuff that because I was not born and raised in America, so I know who the Puritans were. We sort of know Jamestown a little bit. Our history
Yep.
is different, but I learned so much, especially how the Puritans, what they were doing to piss off all of the Anglicans and all of the Christians in England, which forced
Yep.
them to the Netherlands and then forced them over to think, and they were just a bunch of fucking assholes. Sorry to say, but they were. And then they came and then they persecuted and they slaughtered all, the native peoples, which is just like,
Yeah.
awful
Yeah.
history. But
Right. But God is
same
love.
in
Yeah.
America, same in Canada too. Our English did a bad stuff, but yeah, how it is. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Thankfully, more people are aware of that now than they were when I was growing up. So that's at least a good thing to come out of this stuff.
Peter says, in grade school history, the phrase the white man's burden referred to those with knowledge of Christ had a responsibility to spread Christianity, similar to clearing
Yeah,
the planet.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit, I'd
Yeah.
say maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, that sense of urgency and like that this isn't your home, you're like a pilgrim, right? Like in the world but not of it. And I would I would listen to teachers and preachers say like the world is going to hell in a handbasket, right? When you go out, you're in the grocery store or you're at school or you're wherever at a birthday party and you're looking around at these lost souls, they're all going to hell.
yeah,
And it's like you look around like, oh my God, as a kid, it's traumatizing. It really is. And then it's this great responsibility on you. Like you're supposed to save everybody, you know?
yeah.
Yeah. So it's awful.
Yeah, and again, when the Spanish came, because I also took a course as an undergrad on Spanish colonialism, and converting the Aztecs, the Incas, and the Mayans to Catholicism was like just really, you had to do it because otherwise they couldn't be saved and all this kind of
Right.
stuff. And they ruined all their technology, set their technology back hundreds of years. They had this beautiful pyramids, and of course they didn't always do great things. They sacrificed young women, which the Catholics ended, very thankfully. But then they
Yeah.
destroyed all the technology that the Aztecs had, which if you want to go down a rabbit hole, and not go into the ancient aliens BS, but there was a lot of really cool stuff that the Aztecs did. So that's a whole other thing. But that was all lost from colonialism too.
Farrell Cheryl popped in, loving this convo so much. Thank
Thank
you. I
you.
am too. This is really fascinating. Nice to switch gears once in a while. Talk about some other crazy shit.
Yeah,
Right?
the world is nuts.
I
Yeah,
know, isn't
and
it?
you guys got how much is it a month until the election in the United States, which
Yeah.
obviously we won't
So
get into,
November
but
4th, I
still,
think. Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
crazy. It's gonna be a barn burner. Let me tell you, it's
I
gonna
know.
be a barn burner.
Yeah. I try to stay away from politics, in my channel, but
We can
yeah,
still
it's
talk
very
about the election and how weird the election is without talking politics, because as a
exactly.
cultural
Yes.
thing, as a cultural zeitgeist, so to speak, it's been
Yeah.
something, hasn't it? But
Yeah,
that's
it is
no,
crazy. It's like divided so, down the middle, even
it's
though you've got
crazy.
you got parts that are more like you're talking about the whole Bible Belt thing when people
Yeah,
asked if people are surprised if you say you're not a Christian. It does depend on where you
that's
are. It really
correct.
does, you know.
Yeah, in America, I forgot to say this, but in the United States of America, atheists and Muslims are considered the least trustworthy of all Americans, and Christians and I think Jews are considered the most trustworthy, which is like so stupid
Yeah,
because like why would like who cares? Do you know what I mean?
right.
Like in
Yeah.
other countries it's different, right? Like it might be men versus women or whatever, but even at the
Mhm.
same time, like what the heck? Like, why? Because someone's Muslim, you're not going to trust them, or an atheist? Like, who cares? And then,
Yeah.
like Christians, you don't think Christians and Jews light up? I mean, believe me, I'm Jewish. Okay, there's a
Well, I
lot of
know a
Jews
lot of
I don't
Christians that are
like.
not very
You know,
trustworthy. I'll tell you that
that's
right
what I'm
now.
saying. Look at all these preachers who have Gulfstream sevens or whatever. Like, come on,
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
exactly. Yeah. Just going
It
through
really
some more
grinds my
comments.
gears, as Peter Griffin would say.
I burned my biscuits. That's what I
Yeah,
say. That's what I like to
Don't
say.
burn my biscuits. Don't burn my cornbread. I like
No, no, don't burn my corn pizza.
yeah.
Mhm. Indigo, hey there. I think faith is what helped me feel connected to others, but I don't consider myself religious. That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Exactly. Faith, religion, spirituality, those are all different things, and you can pick them apart and work on them separately and combine all of them. It's completely up to you. There's no rule out there. It's just that luckily, if you live in a free country and a good democracy, like a lot of us do,
Yeah.
then at least you can be your own individual self, and that's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first question I ever asked you was when you were streaming with Doug and you were talking a lot about faith and then belief and I was like,
Yeah.
is that the same? Is it different? And um I just think that's really interesting because with me, I think that belief is something that I base like my life and my actions and my
Mhm.
you know, I don't know, my values on. Faith is
Mhm.
something like, I don't know, it's like you're like hope. It's like something really not tangible, but like I want like it's like I want to have faith. I want to be able to believe something, but I can't force myself to believe it,
Of course.
you know? Because I think it's
And
I don't
again,
know.
theoretically and technically, although they are the same, there's always going to be some kind of colloquial aspect where,
Yeah.
like, yeah, because faith is something that most Christian churches talk about a lot, whereas
Mhm.
belief might just be something more mild. But really, even though they're the same, it's still okay to have those divisions and be like, okay, if I believe in something, what do I have faith in? Again, technically they're the same,
Right,
but you can
right.
still use those words in different contexts. And so that's another thing that is very good when you're getting out of
Yeah.
destructive groups, is to figure that out too, you know?
Yeah, there was a term and my, whole Christian experience as a kid and adult,
Sure.
uh, called a witness in your spirit. So it was like
Mhm.
something that spoke to you that transcended anything you could see, right? So that's what faith is like
Mhm.
the evidence of things not seen, right? So
Right.
it's like that, almost like your spidey senses tell you, So when I think of it, like I don't know what I believe. I don't know. I don't have proof what happens after you die and all that. Um, I find it hard to believe that there's a nothing out there. So maybe that makes me slightly agnostic because I don't think I'm full on atheist. But again, I don't have any argument for any of that because you can't really prove it, So it's again,
Sure.
it's like that kind of spiritual, like witness in your spirit is like, yeah, I think there's something out there, but how can I judge anybody that doesn't think there's something out there,
Yeah,
So,
it's I don't know. For me, what I was taught as an adult in like, you know, adult version of Hebrew school was nobody can objectively say what happens when we die. So whatever you think is just like everything else. It's usually just up to who you are, where you grew up, what culture you're in, your
yeah,
experience or non-experience with certain things. And at the end of the day, we're just all human beings, and that's pretty important. And so, yeah, you sort of try to judge people based on what they do versus what they believe, because again, there
yeah,
will be people
exactly.
in your own community that do horrible things, and you
Yeah,
can't say that they're better than people who aren't, because
yeah,
if they're doing horrible things, then they're doing horrible things. So I know that it's a lot of it is like, well, they're this way, and therefore they can't be that bad. Well,
yeah, yeah,
they can
yeah.
be.
I've heard recently people saying like, "Oh, that's so Scientological," or "That's Scientology," and I'm like, "No, there's non-ex Scientologists that act like that too."
Yeah.
Just being an
Well,
asshole.
one of the things with any because I've been out since 2008, and my 2 cents on everything that has gone on in the past year is just it's tough to get out of Scientology. And even myself, I was only in for 3 years. I think there'll
Right.
be aspects of my own personality that won't ever be 100% the way it was before
Yeah.
Scientology. So I have total sympathy with people who grew up in that religion, because you can make a ton of strides, but you can still fall back on some of the things that you
Mhm.
were when you what you learned from Scientology. So,
Right.
you're never going to 100% get rid of it. You can make tons of strides, but at the end of the day, it's really, really hard. And so that's why, on one end, you have to be very compassionate, but you also have to call people out who are acting like they're still in Scientology
Right.
because
Yeah, I
some
guess
people
my point was that it's
don't
not
even know that
unique.
they're doing that.
Right. My point
Yeah.
was it's just not unique to Scientology. A lot of
Agreed, agreed, agreed.
behavior, like I had the
I
same
know.
type of teaching in so many ways of
Yeah.
like, the dogma and all that. It was different words, but so
Yes.
much the same. Yeah, just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. It's a hard one though. It's
Don't
a
get me
hard
started on
argument.
televangelists. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking
There's actually a really great show on HBO called The Righteous Gemstones, which I
oh,
love.
what's that?
It's with John Goodman, Danny McBride, Adam Devine. It's like a bunch of guys, and they're a family of evangelicals who run a mega church. It is so hysterical, and like a big mega church, like a stadium mega church in the South. It's awesome.
Mhm.
I think everyone should watch it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll have
It's
to
so
check it
funny
out.
and a
See
lot
how
of
Bill
working between the evangelicals. So
see how Bill said Protestantism is Christian squirrel tech.
technically, I think if you're Catholic, yeah, you would probably say.
That's so funny. I love it. Hey, Andra says, I grew up in a cult similar to where Marilyn grew up. I really appreciate conversations around that too. Well, it's similar to others, just like Scientology. It's also a unique experience. Yeah, it really is. It's again, it branches off from Christianity, but it has its own unique like set of mind fucks to it, which makes it damaging. I don't think Christianity as a whole, I have no problem with. I have no problem with people believing whatever they want to. They want to, worship a water bottle. I don't care. But if you're abusing people, again, that's where we have a problem with it. You know,
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
it's a good point, Joe. Totally a real struggle to get rid of the cult mind worms afterwards and separate them from what you really believe and what comes from
Hmm.
where. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And even
That could
those
take a long time too.
yeah, even those physical, like I'm looking for the lightning bolt. Like I flinch when people make jokes. Like they're oh my God, Marlene, my cult leader, was so into the Garden of Gethsemane because she was always like loving the suffering and Jesus, the Garden of Gethsemane was where Jesus was praying and crying and fasting and saying, let this cup pass before me because he knew he was going to be crucified. And
Mhm.
she was always like, "Oh, I'm in the garden. Oh, God is causing me to, to sacrifice for all of you ungrateful, peasants and all that." But where is it? There was a joke. Oh, here it is. When I saw this, I was like, "Oh my God, my pearls! Where did Judas betray Jesus in the garden of get some money? Get
Yeah.
some money." Oh my goodness, it was like joking and degrading in Scientology. Like,
Yeah.
oh, if we
Yeah.
oh my goodness, if we make fun of God or Jesus or the Bible, no, you didn't
By the
do that.
way, can you imagine working with a group of German Scientologists when you say don't joke and degrade? You know how effing serious they were?
Yeah.
German Scientologists, no offense to any of our Germans out there, but
Right,
some
right,
of them are pretty non-humorous and cold, let me tell
right.
you.
Yeah.
So they took that shit like even more serious than I'm sure most Sea Org members did. So you couldn't do any. It was just yeah.
And that's where you
Not
were
to
on
offend our
staff.
German followers, I'm just saying there is a stereotype which does exist among some people,
Yeah,
especially
it's
in
cultural.
Scientology.
Yeah. Yeah, so and
Ooh,
that's
yeah,
where you were
not
on
fun.
staff. So you knew more than most because you were on staff in Germany.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah. Have said funny that human sacrifice is very pagan. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
never knew that. I really wasn't, like, allowed to look into it, so and I probably wouldn't have believed it if I heard it, just like the
Right,
N theta thing, right?
that's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. It would have
Yeah.
turbulated your spirit.
Oh my goodness. Mischief Managed. I was saved by a book when I was 12. My dad gave me Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It caught it taught me to question everything. Well, that's good. Yeah, that can
Good.
definitely save you a lot of heartache, a lot of trauma. All right. Well, if there's anything in particular you see in the comments in the start or whatever that you want to take up, let me know. I should have given you a clicker, but there's a lot of
Jim
comments.
still says Germans are well known for the lack of humor. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, nothing too much. There's a lot of people on. Thank you, everybody, so much. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
so great to be with Marilyn, and I know whenever we have these ideas, let's just sit down and do something. Of course, I'm simulcasting on my own, and
Yep.
please,
And
hop over
uh,
there and just give me some love
yeah,
and stuff.
Mark
And I
Turi.
thank everyone so much always for their support.
And I'll put the link in the chat again. Hop over to Mark Turi, and it's at Mark Turi 123. So I'm going to refresh this because you had 83. Now you have 93. All right. We need
Sweet.
7 more.
Oh, that's
Trying
so
to get
cool.
it
Thanks, everybody. Yeah,
awesome.
Marilyn, you guys got me up to 50, so this is a good community.
Well,
And I would,
what?
I'm hopefully we'll go live sometime soon with Aaron. But anyone else who
Nice.
has a channel out there in the SPTV world or outside of it, just drop me a message. I'll come on and we can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah.
I also had Brian Lucas from A Poet on last Sunday, and we did a talk about ancient history. So I'm branching out to do more collabs. And again, thank you everyone for their support.
Fist
It's truly
raised.
very meaningful to me. So thank
My
you.
hubby says very cool discussion. Thanks, Mark and Mayor. He calls me Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, 7
Yeah,
more. Come on, guys. Hop on
just
over.
put it this way. Just put it this way, human beings have been telling stories for a long time. And unfortunately, those stories have been interpreted, misinterpreted, interpreted again, translated, and then mistranslated, and so on. And so
Yeah,
by the time we're here, and I'm sure most of us were born in the 1900s, as the kids are calling it now, or even in the early 2000s or whatever. But it's all like an interpretation of interpretation. So by the time
right.
we get it, then it's gone
Oh,
through so
right.
many different
I
versions
think
that
Hep said the
we're still
telephone game is strong. You're right. Yeah.
it's true, it's very true. But anyway, just if you shouldn't be necessarily afraid of texts, I know that it can be if you're and again appreciate the people that might be still traumatized, but when you're up to it through all that kind of thing, just read what you can, take whatever you want out of it, and
Mhm.
you know so everything's a journey, so
Yep.
there's no one answer, put it that way.
And our friend Pharaoh Cheryl says, how do you pronounce that?
It's Lashana Tova. Thank you for Cheryl. Lashana
Mhm.
Tova means Happy New Year in Hebrew. I
Oh,
appreciate that very much. And
nice.
yeah, thank you, Lashana
Totally
Tova.
Jersey.
Yeah,
I've subbed to Mark now. Thank you for this
and
chat.
then
Thank
yeah,
you
thank
so
you
much
everybody.
for the subs.
I know.
All
Let me.
right.
The late 1900s is what the Gen Z kids are calling like the 1990s and 1980s, and I'm the old man,
The
shaking my
late
fist at the cloud
1900s.
like Grandpa Simpson.
Back
You
in the late
kids, don't do this to
1900s.
me. Don't do this to me. I was born in the 1980s. I was not born in the late 1900s. I'm not prepared yet.
Right.
I'm not prepared for that yet.
We've got G Buddy Never End sub. Thank you so much.
Well, thank
Appreciate
you. Thanks,
that.
everybody. Wow.
And K-Mac just
Thank you.
catching the end. We'll watch from the beginning. Thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and hop on over to Mark Turi. All right. I'm gonna refresh again. Let's see where we're at. Oh my god, you're at 100. I'm so excited. Look.
Oh, sweet. Let me see. Oh, that's amazing. See, Maryland's
Yay.
community you guys always come through.
There, yeah,
That's
I love,
amazing. You're like my first supporters here.
of
Oh, that's
course.
amazing. So there you
Well,
go.
I'm so happy to
Oh, that's
be here to
amazing.
witness another milestone.
I know. Gosh, the first was 50. Now we're up at 101. That's
Yeah,
amazing. You got a great community,
we'll have to
Maryland.
pass
Yeah,
it
I
to
appreciate
AA
it.
Ron. Yeah, AA Ron can get you more to like 500. So,
Oh,
all
that's
right. Well,
whatever. I mean, yeah, hopefully he's been busy, but I hope he can go on to talk about some stuff. And, he's always been supportive too. Anyone who's supportive, that's the whole thing, like
Yep.
that's just the main
Yeah.
point. Don't care what you believe in, don't care what you're preaching or not preaching, just as long as you're a good person and
Yep.
you're doing good
All
things
that
and
matters.
helping people learn and heal, and that's the main thing. So, which is what you're
Yep.
doing, Marilyn,
Thank
helping
you. I
people with your own experience. So
appreciate
it's
that
a
very much.
it's a good thing.
Thanks. All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's do this again soon.
Of
I'm
course.
just loving all of
Absolutely.
our conversations that we have. And thank you, everybody
Thank
that
you.
has joined us. And if you can hop over and subscribe to Mark and like and subscribe over there, subscribe here. And if you're watching the replay, thank you so much. And leave a hello in the chat. And we'll see you soon. Bye. Have a great day. Bye. Zenu, Marlene, everybody partake. Cheers. This is good coffee. This is why, my hubby makes the coffee.